Welcome on in, Black Legion lovers. This is Sprues and Studs, and continuing our foray into the Eye of Terror, we will be taking a look at some action figures that have not seen the light of day in quite some time. In this video, we will be comparing three different aspects of the version 1 Black Legion action figures versus the newly released V4 Chosen action figures. These three different aspects will be size, construction, and then finally painting. Hopefully at the end of this video, we will conclude which action figure is best. So let's whip out our magnifying glasses and then get to the comparison. Straight off the bat, there is literally a monstrous size difference between this version 1 Black Legion action figure versus the version 4 Black Legion Chosen. If you have been following along, the size difference exists mostly in the legs of the Marines. Taking a step back, it is absolutely crazy how the scale has changed from the inception of these action figures. However, you eagle-eyed viewers will notice that some of the other parts have little to no changes whatsoever. This helmet here is roughly the same size, which means that you can actually swap the heads together. The pauldron size is exactly the same too, which makes the proportions really odd looking. I will use the metric system in this instead of imperial, but you will notice that the arms for this version 4 action figure is about 5 centimeters long. And then with this version 1 figure, it is also roughly around 5 centimeters long. The width of this version 1 figure's chest is around 3.5 centimeters. This chest for the version 4 is also 3.5 centimeters. But if you look at these action figures side by side with each other, it kind of looks like this one has a smaller torso and chest area, but I think the reason is because this torso area actually tapers down to the waist, whereas this torso area remains a solid block. While we are on the topic of size matters, just look at the size difference between these two chainswords. So this is the chainsword that belongs to the Chosen, and this one is the one that belongs to the regular Black Legion action figure. Tip to tip, the Chosen's chainsword is about 10 centimeters, while this one is 9.5 centimeters. And here is the noticeable 0.5 centimeter difference. So I would say that in terms of size and scale, when you put these action figures side by side next to each other, I think the version 1 looks very weirdly proportioned just because perhaps the legs are a bit too small with regards to how the body is. And finally, with the version 4 figure, the look of this action figure, well, literally it looks right. In terms of how the action figures are built, there have been some pretty major changes both under the hood and subtly. I'm going to gloss over this section because I went into extreme detail in another video, so if you want to see that video, I'll link it in the description below. But I will highlight the most major changes here. Interestingly enough, the V1 and the V4 pauldron has more common with each other than the V2 and the V3 figures. The V4 and the V1 both use a ball and socket joint to attach the pauldrons, but I have to say that the V4 is more refined because you have way more movement laterally back and forth, and you can pivot this pauldron back and forth because of this ball joint. The pauldron of the version 1 has less movement back and forth like that, but you can still get a little bit of wiggle. The construction of the hands are very different from each other too. The material that was used on the Chosen, I feel, is a little bit more pliable right here. I think this grips the weapon quite a lot better. In contrast, the V1 hands look very delicate and fragile, but they are able to hold this chainsword with no issue whatsoever. Now, if we look at the wielding of this bolt pistol over here, it would appear that this action figure does not look like it wields it properly due to the index finger not being able to wrap around the trigger area. Now, we don't have this issue with the version 4 action figure as I place the pistol in his hand, and you can see the index finger does comfortably wrap around the trigger. And we will take a look at the other side. It just looks so much better. Another issue with the version 1 figures are the ankle joints, because they're not as robust enough to hold up the figure, because the joint right here is pencil thin compared to this beefy ball and socket joint on the Chosen. I think in the end I prefer the construction of the version 4 figure because most of the kinks have been ironed out at this point. Veterans of the long war and of this channel have heard me whine time and again about the reduction of paint quality and effort to paint the details of the action figures over time, which is and here I whine again. It is a damn shame. So just to switch things up, we have this Havoc Marine, and you will immediately notice that the head is properly dry brushed with highlights up here. These highlights make the action figure more tasty and pop into life. The edges of the targeting system also have these highlights. However, the one thing that I do not miss is the flat red lenses on these version 1 action figures. Then obviously opposite to the Havoc is the Chosen, and the highlights are not present, but hey, at least the lenses are a bright red metallic color, which is great to see. However, you will notice in these areas there are no highlights whatsoever. Speaking of highlights, you will notice that the elbow, the tops of the legs, and the back of the legs all have very prominent white stripes indicating obviously highlighting. Just to mix this up a little bit, you will notice that this particular Chosen does not have any of that sort of highlighting. It's completely absent in the aforementioned areas, which is again sad to see that is not there. While the cloth tabard is roughly painted, it has both bright yellow highlights and shading that's going on with it. Even though I don't really agree with the color selection, I do appreciate the level of detail that has been imparted on this figure. Again, looking at the modern era figures, there is sadly no highlighting and very little shading going on at all. The final area that I will focus on is the pauldron of this V1 figure. While the shading is kind of roughly applied and not very even, it has pooled in the eye socket area and definitely gives this figure more depth. With this Chosen with the plasma pistol, the demon head, as I pointed out in the review, desperately needs some shading. You know, I will have to say that despite all the rough highlighting and shading on the V1 figures, I think I prefer these earlier figures in terms of painting over the more bland tasting version 4 Chosen figures. Alright, members of the chapter, I think we have come to a definitive conclusion about these action figures. So overall, I prefer the size and the construction of this version 4 action figure, which gives the version 4 action figure the win. However, I will still continue to whine, bitch, and moan about the olden days of these version 1 action figures that look so much better when they're painted up like that. You know, I really like doing these comparison videos because it's a natural thing that we human beings do. We are very apt to compare and contrast one thing versus the other thing. However, the benefit of doing this video is again dragging these action figures out from their dark boxes and then revealing them into the light so that we can see the progression of how JoyToy has improved their action figures over time, and there has been some drastic improvements in 3 years of time. So I guess that we have made 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but at least it's still 1 step progress forward. Alright, fellow members of the chapter, let me know in the comments section which version figures do you like and why. If you disagreed or agreed with any of my assessments, again, please leave a comment in the comments section, just because I really love engaging all you members of the chapter in some nice back and forth dialogue. And if you want to procure any of these action figures, well, I don't believe that the version 1 Chaos Marines are made anymore, but at least the Chosen version 4 are available. Just click on the link in the description below, or you will be brought to David Toys. As I said before, I have done business with them for 3 straight years, and I find that their customer service is absolutely phenomenal, and they give us free and tariff-free shipping, which is a big thing for us in the United States. And again, before you check out, do not forget to use the code SNS to receive 12% off of your purchase. And with that being said, thank you, members of the chapter, for watching these action figure reviews. I always appreciate your comments, likes, and subscribes, as this channel would not survive with all of your help and all of your input. You guys are awesome, and once again, I'll see you all in the next one.